Hello, Anne. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I'm a bit warmer than I was the last time we recorded because then I was absolutely freezing. But now I'm pretty comfortable with a new look, as you may notice. I've rearranged things in my office, and we have a new look for this installment of Ask Eddie and Anne.
Cool.
And who is that behind you doing the Benny Buffano pose on your couch?
That is Charlotte. If you look really closely, you can see Emily on the blanket right by the arm of the couch.
Oh,
It's a
oh yeah, I
little bit
see.
of
I
white.
see. Yeah, I
Yeah,
see
that's
a
Emily.
little bit of white right there.
Yeah, they were
And
up
that was a
together in that.
that was a totally obscure reference for San Francisco people who know about Beniamino Buffano, the sculptor, who was very well known in San Francisco as a modern art sculptor. In fact, let me reach over here. This is a
Yeah.
press club award won by my father years ago for best best sports story to Eddie Muller from the press club in San Francisco, and that was Benny Buffano did the sculpture
It's cute.
of the cat that was like his thing. He became known for that. Anyway, that's why she's doing what Kathleen and I call the Buffano. When the cat
Oh,
does that and tucks in
it
the
just tucks
paws and
in.
everything, yeah, it's like
You
that.
just see
She's
kind of the
doing the
slits for eyes.
exactly the Buffano.
Oh,
Okay, um, let's do this. I haven't had a lot of time to look at these questions to glance over them, but
I got them. I was doing 5 loads of laundry this morning. So I know I wanted to get those to you
okay. And of
sooner.
course, I don't. When is this one going to air?
29th after
The
Christmas.
29th. Okay,
Yes.
very
I
good.
did I didn't see the point of having it Christmas week. Is that the 29th? Yeah. I think it's 29th.
Fine. Fine. Well, I've had to do a new setup here in my office because if people, I can't remember the date, but I'm going tomorrow morning. I'm going to be recording some stuff for TCM, uh, just like this. This is essentially the setup. I'm doing a night of true crime movies with Paula Zahn from the Discovery Network from On the Case with Paula Zahn, which will air, I believe, sometime in early January. So if you're watching this and you tune in for that night, you will see essentially the exact same setup, but you won't see me wearing these clothes.
Right. You will not be in a hoodie.
And if I sound a little different in this installment, it's because TCM sent me in anticipation of this. They sent me this fabulous new microphone, which I'm using for the first time right now. Did I just mute myself? Can you hear
No,
me?
I can still hear you.
Okay, good. There we go. Okay, all good now. Just explaining to folks, all those folks who said, Eddie, change your angles so we can see more of your house and all that kind of stuff. Well, now you got your wish because
Nice to see a painting of your dad.
that is my dad back there, the winner of this award. That's him right back there. Okay, you want to kick us off here, Ann? Get us
I will
going.
I will kick us off.
Okay.
Okay, and this is from our friend Michael in Post Falls, Idaho.
Michael is the champion of questions.
Absolutely. In the September 8th, 22 edition of Ask Eddie, Eddie commented that his thing right now was to be an evangelist for the noir films not made in the US. Assuming Los Tallos Amargos from Argentina would be top on his list, what other two films, each from a different country, would Eddie show to illustrate his point? And Michael's choices are Pale Flower from Japan, the aforementioned Bitter Stems, and Black Gravel from Germany.
Uh, all all great choices. Those are three great choices.
And they've all
Um,
played North City festivals.
they have all played at the Noir City Film Festivals and my international festivals. Well, it's an interesting question, my answer is going to be um, I can't quite tell. I guess I said I want to be an evangelist for films not made in the United States, but I when I heard this question, I thought he was asking what international films do I want to find and restore. Um, so I'll just throw a couple out. There's a really terrific film. I think it's from 1962. I think from Brazil called Assault on the Pay Train. That's like a heist movie from Brazil that's based on a true story that is really good and should be more known internationally because I think it would be in that list of like the great heist movies of all time.
Yeah.
So Assault on the Pay Train is a good one. And I would love to restore Death as a Caress, the Norwegian film by Edith Karlmar that was made in 1949. That's sort of like a Norwegian version of The Postman Always Rings Twice, with significant differences. So those are two films I would love to restore and find wider circulation for them. And of course, there's all these films that we wouldn't restore, but all these fabulous Mexican noir films, which they're actually doing. Daniela Michel, who is the director of the Morelia International Film Festival in Mexico, she's an evangelist for classic Mexican cinema, and she's done a really great job of making sure that a lot of the older Mexican films, especially the noir films, are properly preserved and restored. It's a little tough to get them out of Mexico. I mean, I've shown several of them at Noir City, but my goal is to really show them on TCM. But it's difficult because of rights situations and stuff like, as always. But there are a number of those films, Crepusculo and La Otra and La Palma de tu Mano, In the Palm of Your Hand, which is one of my personal favorites, with Arturo de Cordova. Those are all great films. Night Falls with Pedro Armendáriz is a terrific Mexican noir film. So anyway, those are a few of them. But Norway and Brazil, those are really not places you would expect to see a noir film coming from, and that's why I cited those two first.
Yeah, Death is Crest is a great movie. That was one of my favorite films we showed at that international series for North City.
But I really felt, even as we were showing it, that this could use a restoration. It felt like we were looking at a TV print or something. Like the contrast wasn't as good as it could have been. There's another film that we showed at the festival that I really loved, the Swedish film Girl with Hyacinths.
That's good.
That was a really great film as well. So anyway, there's plenty more, but you only asked me for two other films, each from a different country. So there you go. All right. Now, Kathleen asks an interesting question. She says, I recently read a wonderful neo-noir novel called Velvet Was the Night by the Mexican-Canadian novelist Silvia Moreno Garcia. A romantic, politically infused noir that takes place during the student protests in Mexico City during the early 1970s. She also enjoyed Moreno Garcia's earlier Highsmithian noir novel, Untamed Shore. And I should point out right here that I believe we actually had an interview with her in the Noir City magazine not that long ago, because of Velvet Was the Night. So if you want to see Vince Keenan's interview with Ms. Moreno Garcia, it is in I think it was like 3 issues ago that we had that. And Kathleen's question is, have we read the novel? I'm sorry to say I have not read it yet. But can we recommend other noir novels by people of color, past or present? I can certainly do that. Anne, do you have any that come to mind?
Nothing's coming to mind. So
okay, then I got you. I got you covered.
Okay.
I mean, first off, is anything by Chester Himes,
Yeah.
who is the greatest African American crime
Yeah.
novelist of all time. So all of his Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones and all that stuff. Uh, those are fantastic books. Um, I'm thinking of Paco Ignacio Taibo from who is Spanish but lives in Mexico City. He is a I belong to the International Association of Crime Writers, of which he has long been a prominent figure. And I think in Spain every year he does a noir week that's like a literary based noir week. I can't remember the exact town that's in, but his books are fantastic. He's won, there's a Dashiell Hammett Award given by the International Association of Crime Writers for the best novel of the year, which he has won twice. So if you're not familiar with him, last name is spelled Taibo, Paco Ignacio Taibo. He's fantastic. I know there are several African American women writing crime fiction now. Um, uh, oh my God, I got to remember her name. Roselle Hall. There's a middle name there that is slipping my mind. There's Kelly Garrett. She's written quite a few books at this point. And a woman that I know who writes like cop books in LA is Paula Woods. She's very good. And actually, it's funny. How can I forget this one? I'm actually reading this book right now, The Black Minutes by Martin Solares, which I understand has been made into a movie that I haven't seen yet. But this is a pretty great noir novel set in Mexico. Um, so there you go. There are plenty more. Oh, how can I forget? The hottest crime writer in America right now is Sean Cosby, who wrote a fantastic book called Razorblade Tears that won the Mystery Writers of America Best Novel Award, I think, last year. And Sean has also been interviewed for the Noir City magazine. I think two or whatever. I mean, I'm impressed that we have these two interviews, with these very hot young writers of color that are both writing noir. And I can't leave out my buddy Gary Phillips, who's one of the veteran crime writers now, or Gar Anthony Haywood, who's also both those guys are in LA and they've been writing crime fiction for decades now, and they're both superior novelists. So I hope that pads out your reading list, Kathleen.
Well, and Kathleen is one that asked us last time about Emily the Criminal. Did you want to give her your thoughts on that? Because I know you watched it.
I watched it as well. Yeah, I've
No,
been talking. I've been doing all the. Did you see it, Ann?
Not yet.
Oh, darn! I was going to say I'm doing all the talking. I was going to let you run with this one.
Oh.
I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was a classic film noir for our particular time and place in American culture. And I had watched White Lotus, like we were talked about briefly, and the actress who's in White Lotus, Aubrey Plaza, who's fine in White Lotus, but her performance did not prepare me for what she does in Emily the Criminal, which is a much more complex characterization than what she does on White Lotus, and it's just terrific. I mean, I can't say enough about it. I'm embarrassed that I'm spacing out right now on the writer director's name, but it's a three. I'm embarrassed, but he did a fantastic job. The script is really good. The acting is phenomenal. His direction is spot on, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the film. But mostly, it's just it is a classic noir in the sense that it's a regular person pushed too far who realizes that they are capable of doing very bad, very illegal things, but you totally empathize with her. And it's really interesting because she's an artist in the film who gets absolutely no respect and can't really earn a living being an artist. So she ends up falling in with a ring of criminals and discovers that she has an aptitude for it. And it's really, really good. So I would easily put that on my list of the best of last year
Oh, wow.
if I kept such lists, which I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's your turn to read the question now.
Okay. So this is from Rob. I would love to get a list of Eddie's 10 best scripts in noir, ones with not a hole in sight. To me, Act of Violence, Double Indemnity, The Breaking Point, Force of Evil, and Woman on the Run are among
The best.
the best. I cut that off.
Okay, well, I can't argue with any of those. I mean, so there's 5.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The one that's odd in there is Woman on the Run, because as much as I love the script, it wasn't really a particularly it was that more of that movie was improvised than people realize.
Really?
And yeah, in terms of the dialogue and stuff, Dennis O'Keefe and Ann Sheridan and Norman Foster had a lot to do with the final dialogue in the script. But it's a very, very good screenplay, but it's just uncommon that it was something that kind of happened on the fly when they were in San Francisco. Not the plot elements,
right,
but the actual dialogue within the scenes. I'm going to add to that list, and it's not so hard to think of this because I'll just think of like my top 10 movies, because you know me, and it all starts with the script. So
yeah,
I'm not gonna put a film on that list that doesn't have a really tight script. So Sunset Boulevard is as good a screenplay as has ever been written. I love the script for The Asphalt Jungle. I think it's absolutely incredible. I mean, how can you fault the script for the Maltese Falcon?
I know, it's like it's just a great adaptation of the book, like a phenomenal one.
Yeah, absolutely. I of course love the screenplay for In a Lonely Place.
Yeah.
And let me think if there's another really, really clever one in there. Well, a screenplay that I really like because it shouldn't work at all is Dalton Trumbo's script for The Prowler, because it's so weird. Because it's just 2 people.
Yeah.
And there are these jumps in time, like this is happening in such a compressed telescope thing, and there's this whole series of scenes where it's just him showing up at her door, and then she sends him away, then he shows up at the door, and they have another scene, and then she sends him away. And it shouldn't work, but somehow Trumbo makes it work, and it feels unlike any other script of that time, even though the premise is, everybody in 1951 said, oh, it's another Double Indemnity thing, but it's not. It's not. It works in a totally different way. And then the last act is so bizarre and so brazen that they finally do kind of fall in love, but they're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a strange movie.
Yeah.
So I really admire that screenplay because it just takes so many risks, and it's brazen. It's a very brazen script. So I admire that. Do you have any particular ones that aren't from Denmark that you really love?
Yes, I do watch things that are not Danish. Repeat Performance. I just think I like because I read the book. I finally read the book, and I like how they changed it a lot. And
totally different protagonist.
Yeah. Because the protagonist is the wife, and it's such a great portrait. I mean, it has that sort of fantasy element where she's allowed to go back 1 year later to see if she can change things, which but at the same time, it's a really good marital drama. Like you're seeing her marriage falling apart and her trying to figure out what to do, even though she knows what's going to happen. She's kind of powerless to stop it. And that's sort of, that's how life really is. It's two different people and they're going to do what they're going to do. You have no control over events, just what you do about them. And also, yeah, and I think that the character of her poet friend is really well written. Of course, Richard Basehart's great in that role.
William Williams,
which is also they do leave some stuff out about him from the book too. Which was not going to be in a movie at that time.
Well, he's a transvestite. He's a cross-dresser in the book, but they leave that out. He's clearly gay in the movie.
Yeah.
But they leave out the fact that he is too different. He's a male character and a female character.
Yeah, William and
in
Mary.
The book. Yeah, William and Mary in the book, and then he's just William Williams in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just, I think, a really good adaptation of a book, which is something that always interests me when I'm watching something that's not an original screenplay. And a lot of times, like I said, I thought the movie worked better than the book really did. It's one of the ones where I felt that way, where I actually preferred the movie to the book.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I'm glad you picked one that we restored. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's two. That's Woman on the Run and Repeat Performance are in this conversation, and those were films that honestly might have disappeared without
No, because when the first time I saw Repeat Performance is when we screened it at North City, and the print was terrible. And I was so happy that we restored that one, because it's actually my favorite of our restorations. There's something about that movie that just really speaks to me.
I love that. That's fantastic. And you just made me think about another great screenplay, because it too is a fantastical noir with a supernatural element, which is Alias Nick Beale, which I loved the screenplay for that film. That is tight as it gets. I mean, obviously it's borrowing from the Faust legend and all that stuff, but it's just so well done, and the characterizations are so good. Ray Milland. I mean, this isn't a place to talk about performances, because it's really about the writing. But that script, Jonathan Latimer's script for Alias Nick Beale, is just perfection. Okay. So Terry in Sonoma County, California, as opposed to the town of Sonoma, says, "Can you please name your top or as many as you have energy for?" Oh, book to film adaptations. I see what you're doing here, Anne. Yeah. And what makes them work so well? Well, you brought up an interesting point here, Anne, and that was the repeat performance script deviates considerably from the book.
Yeah.
And you like that. So you would characterize that as a really good adaptation, because it made a really good movie. Even though it's not truly an adaptation of the book, it kind of takes the premise of the book, reliving the previous year, but it's an entirely different character who relives the previous year in the movie than in the book. So if I was to say, what's a great adaptation, what's the most faithful adaptation of a book to film? There are two, obviously, and I've mentioned both of them already: The Maltese Falcon and The Asphalt Jungle. Those are the Asphalt Jungle. The movie is better than the book, because it leaves out all the peripheral characters and just focuses on the criminals. And that was the right decision to make. So the newspaper people who figure prominently in the book are gone. The cops are in the movie, but they have a few scenes, whereas they have 3 times as many scenes in the book. But it's a great adaptation. Then there are adaptations that are different but are really great. And I like In a Lonely Place, obviously, is
extremely different
from the novel, but it's great.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that it's different, and I can see I enjoy both the book and the
Yeah.
film for different reasons.
Yeah.
Um, what else is a good one? I don't want to. Well, I will say that unquestionably, the breaking point, which was discussed on
Yeah.
Rob's list,
Yeah.
the Randall McDougall's screenplay for the breaking point is better than Hemingway's novel.
Yeah.
Hemingway's novel is really, I don't like it. It's not a very good novel, but boy, did they make a great movie out of it. So that's a great one. Um,
And
I'm
I meant to
trying.
say, I forgot when we were talking about screenplays before, but it's actually it is based on a story. Is Gun Crazy? That's like one of my favorite scripts of all time. I love that story so much.
And boy, is that ever hugely different in the final version than the story that appeared
Yes.
in the Saturday Evening Post,
Yeah.
which is not that good. And yeah, Gun Crazy is fantastic. Again, a Trumbo screenplay, even though his name isn't actually on the film.
Yeah. Oh, and
Um,
Mildred Pierce is another one that really kind of changed a lot of elements of the original story, and I thought was better for it because when they did the adaptation of the whole book with Kate Winslet, you can just see why it doesn't work as a movie.
yeah, I
Whereas
agree. I agree with you
yeah,
completely. I like the book. I think the book
yeah,
is
I really
really
like the book
good.
too. Yeah,
But the movie is the movie version.
yeah,
That's what it is. There is no Jerry Wald stuck in the murder at the beginning of the film that starts everything because he was completely obsessed with Double Indemnity's that seeing that in Double Indemnity, he felt like, that's how you do it.
yeah.
um and I'm trying, there's got to be other ones that are, you know um I like Strangers on a Train. I like the
Hmm.
screenplay for Strangers on a Train, and I'm kind of bringing it up because uh, Raymond Chandler gets a lot of credit for that screenplay, and he didn't actually write it. Chenzi Orman wrote that screenplay. This young woman, she was very young when she wrote it. I don't even know how old she was, but like in her 20s, I think. And it's really good. It's a really good film version of a very complex, strong novel. And Chandler didn't do it very well.
Yeah.
Chandler was a bad screenwriter. He was
Yeah.
actually kind of a bad screenwriter. I have up here on my shelf, and I'm not going to reach over and pull it down because I'll knock everything over. His original screenplay for The Lady in the Lake, and it is virtually unfilmable
Yeah.
because he put all of his effort into the passage work conversations. Like Marlowe flirts with a receptionist, and it's like 4 pages of dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, this is not the point of the scene. He is not Dalton Trumbo when it comes to, Trumbo always said, jump into the middle of the scene,
Yeah.
right? That's how you write B films. You start in the middle of the scene. And
Yeah.
and Chandler, he loved that ramping up. Let's
Yeah.
have Marlowe walk in and comment on the decor and comment on everything and flirt a little bit, and then we'll get to the point of the scene.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, that's as much energy as I have for that. I hope I answered some of those. Anyway, so who's
I guess,
answering the
where are we? We're on
number
five.
five?
Okay, so this is from Patrick. I identify one or two good movies from Poverty Row Studios and tell us why you choose the ones that you did. Woman on the Run and Detour immediately come to my mind. What else?
That's interesting. I never really thought of um I guess Fidelity Pictures uh was a Poverty Row studio. And don't tell Howard Welch that, but I guess, it wasn't really a studio. It was kind of just an independent outfit. But um but I'm going to say right off the top, the greatest movie noir film ever made by a Poverty Row studio, and people will say it's Detour, but I'm going to say it's Gun Crazy, because that is, for
Yeah.
all intents and purposes, that's a monogram production.
Yeah.
It started as a monogram film, and it took so long to get the thing produced that it ended up being like an Allied Artists film
Yeah.
by the time it was released. And then United Artists distributed it, so people mistakenly thought that it was a United Artists film, but it's not. It's actually made by the King brothers, who, were major stakeholders in Monogram Pictures, and produced a lot of great stuff there, like Dillinger and The Gangster and other things. But I'm going to say, well, another Monogram picture that I just showed on Noir Alley was Decoy, which I'm not
Yeah.
saying is great by any means, but it sure is entertaining. So I love that, and I guess we can call Eagle Lion. It's not really a Poverty Row studio. There was a lot of money flying around Eagle Lion Films, um, to get them started, and it was a lot of British money that was infused there, to get that studio off the ground. But I will cite The Spiritualist.
It's a great movie.
That
And
is,
we're playing at North City in January, and I'm super excited because I don't think I'm not sure if I've seen it on the big screen before or not. And
yeah,
I
and
love that movie.
yeah, it's just so fun. It's just such a great movie, and people talk all about, because it's John Alton
Yeah.
cinematography, and he's working with his old buddy Bernard Voorhouse, who is actually the guy who brought Alton to Hollywood from Argentina.
Oh.
Bernard Voorhouse was working in Argentina in the 1930s, and that's where he met Alton, who had come there from Hungary and helped set up the Lumiton film studio in Argentina, and shot a whole bunch of movies that have been lost to time. But The Spiritualist was just a fantastic film, and I tell people that it's like the great John Alton movie that you haven't seen.
Yeah.
Because people know Raw Deal, they know all the Anthony Mann films, right?
Yeah.
And Hollow Triumph, which we're also showing in January.
Yeah.
But The Spiritualist is one that is kind of under the radar, and it actually has some of his best effects and best lighting. What he does in that mansion that Lynn Barry lives in, the lighting in there is just so spectacular.
Yeah.
And he's because it's about trickery and all these little gimmicks
exactly.
that Turhan Bey uses to trick people. And that's kind of what John Alton is doing in the cinematography for this movie. Is he's pulling off all these amazing magic tricks with light in the film, and it's great.
And I just want to say really quickly, since we're talking about John Alton, we just showed for North City Christmas, which we had last week as of this taping, I the Jury, which was in 3D, and that restoration was gorgeous. That is the best looking 3D I have ever seen. But the choices with the cinematography were incredible. Like, it totally, just the way he was constantly framing things so things would be in the foreground really subtly, like, so that it was always showing off the 3D, and like in a good way. Like, I got completely absorbed in it. But I have to say that opening sequence of that guy crawling for his gun, which is on the chair, which is right here. So he's basically crawling into the camera the whole time. And it goes on long enough where you get really like uncomfortable, like in a good way, because it makes you feel what he's going through, like how desperately he's trying to get to that gun on the chair. And that opening was great.
I have to say, if people want to understand why going to the movies is such a wonderful experience.
Oh God, yeah.
That was a show that proved it. If you stay home and watch a 2D version of I the Jury by yourself, you might like it. but it is nothing compared to seeing it in 3D in a crowded movie theater where suddenly the movie is massively entertaining.
Well, yeah,
Even
especially
though this is not really a good movie.
film.
It's not a good film, right?
No, but
And
then it was also fun because, like, in the scene where Mike's investigating stuff, and there's like this older guy and younger guy, and like it's so hilarious because he like cannot figure out that they're in a sexual relationship, and he's like going through the photos, and what was it? Uh, Hitler and
oh yes, yes, yes.
Hitler and
That that just got such a rise out of the
Hitler
audience
enters
when they're
Vienna,
looking at
something
all
like
these
that.
photographs of these two dudes vacationing in Europe together, and it's like, this is pretty obvious what's going on here.
Yes.
And Mike is like, well, you guys, what is with you two? What's up with you guys? And it's classic.
It is.
And of course, all the women just throwing themselves at Biff Elliott.
Yeah.
All he has to do is walk into a room and they're like, oh, Mr. Hammer.
Well, I mean, that one of the twins is definitely a nymphomaniac, so I'm not sure that was much of a statement.
That wasn't much of a stretch for her, yeah.
But any man that walked in there, it would have been the same thing, I believe.
But you can that movie really shows how Mickey Spillane was just, riffing on all of the tropes of detective fiction. But it's like, I'm just going to have a guy who's kind of a lunkhead as a detective who just barges his way through everything.
Yeah.
And like everything has to be spelled out for him. I mean, it's comical. I mean, even more so in I, the Jury than in Kiss Me Deadly, where, Ralph Meeker is not the greatest investigator in Kiss Me Deadly. He's kind of missing clues all along the way.
Yeah.
But this one is hysterical because Preston Foster is around just to kind of lead Biff Elliott to the next scene because he can't figure it out for himself, Exactly. So he kind of winds him up and points him in the right direction. Yeah. And then Biff kind of barges in and knocks over the furniture. And also, I have to say, purists will have a fit, but the movie is supposed to take place in Manhattan, and they don't make any bones about it. There's like references to Greenwich Village and all this kind of stuff. And yet Mike has his office
in the Bradbury
in the Bradbury building in LA. It's like, let's just use the major architectural landmark in Los Angeles to have Mike's office. And everybody recognizes it. And I got to tell you, what I loved about that film was, just as you said, Alton, I could almost tell he was telling the director, Harry Essex, like, we're not going to do the gimmicky stuff. There has to be a reason for the 3D effects, right? Like, let's compose the shots so that the 3D is really effective. And man, those high angle shots of the Bradbury building were like vertigo. It's like, whoa, because the camera's like leaning over the railing. And it's just as you said, he's got like the foreground, the middle ground. You get the sense of how high up you are.
Yeah.
Man, that was great.
Yeah.
And of course, John Alton lighting the Bradbury building is just, that's like noir heaven,
It really was. The location, that was just such a great location. Even though I decided it took me out of the film for a minute because I was like, that's supposed to be in New York.
Yeah, this is not New York.
It's just location. Okay, I got it. But it really tripped me up for a minute.
But did you
Velma a lot, by the way?
Yeah. Velma was really good.
Yeah.
And don't you love the fact that it is a genuine Christmas movie?
Yeah. Yay, we did it. Sometimes it's hard. We've sort of had to go like a little.
Yeah,
we've the range sometimes.
We've reached,
We've reached a couple times, and that was really great. It was like, this is perfect for North City Christmas.
Yeah, and it was so great. I really enjoyed. It was kind of like what they did with The Lady in the Lake, how they turned that into a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
it was very similar because the use of the greeting cards, the
Yeah,
like the Christmas cards to set the scenes
where that,
was
yeah, I
so
love
clever,
that.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, so a good time was had by all. That was a good show.
It
I'm glad.
was. It was just so much fun to see it with an audience. I mean, that was really enjoyable. That was a good one. I mean, I thought it was really funny. You kind of had to give your like little thing about at the beginning about, not to get offended, but
my Mickey Spillane
my
trigger warning.
yeah, I gotta tell you, that was nothing compared to the fucking book.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
it was just like, I remember this one scene when he goes in a bar and he managed to be misogynistic, homophobic, and racist all
Oh
the
yeah.
same
No,
chat scene.
the books are off the charts, so at least the movies have some restraint, And I
Yeah,
have to say that God love Peggy Castle because
yeah,
they really lightened up the ending of that for the film version, right?
yeah,
But she's hot as a pistol. I mean, when she, because they used on the poster the shot of her like starting to take her blouse off,
yeah,
and it makes that you think like, oh my God, this is, we're going to get to this at some point in the movie, and then she doesn't.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it doesn't make any difference because she's so incredibly sexy in that
Mm-hmm.
role that at the end it's just that John Alton photographing a beautiful woman playing a femme fatale.
Yeah.
You don't need to see anything else. I mean, it's just the lighting and her whole performance was just fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to see something far kinkier,
Yeah.
is The Long Wait, where which is not a Mike Hammer story. It's just Mickey Spillane. Anthony Quinn is the lead, but Peggy Castle is in that too. And
Ah,
there's a final scene in that is about as kinky as movies could get in the 1950s. A lot of weirdness going on at the end of that film. Okay, that's just a teaser I'm throwing out there. So there
a
you go.
long way.
Okay, so here we go. Hey,
Oh, I'm
Mark.
sorry. Just one thing. Sorry, on the Poverty
Oh,
Row movies, one that I really like. I always want to say it's called. Yeah, I think it is called Suspense. Was the one with Albert Decker?
yeah.
Yeah, it is Suspense, where he's like hired someone to kill him, and then he changes because things change, and he changes his mind. And I love that film just because it's all one of my favorite scenes in like any film is when he's like in the closet eating like out of canned foods, and his wife and his friend are freaking out. She's like won't come out of the closet, and Decker is just so great. And that's like I'd seen that story. I think originally it was like maybe might have been an episode of The Whistler originally, but at least a similar story. But that was I just wanted to put a plug in that, and it's definitely. I mean, it is a B film. It's definitely
Another monogram picture,
yeah, but it's a great story,
and it
and
has Belita in it. Come on,
yeah, yeah,
Belita is in it.
yeah,
And she does her death-defying leap through the ring of swords.
yeah.
What's not to like?
I know, I love
And that
it.
skimpy little black leather outfit she wears, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, okay, here we go. Mark from Scotland. Yay. He wants to know what film noir from the classic era has aged best over time, and which film noir from the classic eras, which films noir from he spells it correctly, from the classic era improve with repeat viewings. Okay, you have any thoughts on this? I think many of the films we've already mentioned on this episode, uh, have aged brilliantly well.
Yeah, I think Double Indemnity, especially because like when I actually did not this job, but my job before, they used to always they would do lunch and learns, which you do at my job anyway. And like when I was leaving, they said, "Can you do one on film noir before you leave?" And by the way, this was transportation planning.
Okay.
So I made a slideshow, and when I was doing it, like a lot of the stuff I was pulling to talk about was from Double Indemnity because it's like the perfect film noir,
Mm-hmm.
and that all these elements that or do we associate with noir are in that film, and the dialogue, like I pulled like a clip of dialogue and they were like, because it was
Yeah.
just so like sassy. And so I think that that's one that people can, like a modern art audience can really get into. And also I think too, just like for me, when I like every time I watch it, it's also like figuring out Barbara Stanwyck's character
Mhm.
and her character arc, because she's kind of, I mean, she's playing it so much more than just, I mean, she is a just batshit crazy, but I mean, she does more with the character than that. I mean, she plays that part of it, but I'm not ever like 100% sure about how she felt about Neff. Like, was there something deeper there than just using him to get rid of her husband? So, and also this, and actually Neff, the same thing. There's just like stuff about him that's always like I go back and forth on about who he is as a person and stuff, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that film has aged well. Obviously, Out of the Past has aged really well.
Uh-huh.
Uh, because that was not a huge thing when it came out.
Yeah.
So it has time has caught up with Out of the Past, and now I think largely because of Mitchum's performance,
Uh-huh.
that he was a bit ahead of his time with his
Yeah.
style. That people now see him as like the beatnik, cool hipster of noir.
Yeah.
Um, I think Nightmare Alley, the fact that it got remade,
Yeah.
um, shows that it was onto something back then that made it a very prescient film for its time, and actually ahead of its time, and exposing the grift and the spook racket and all that kind of stuff, which wasn't that common back then, and it still holds up really, really well.
And another great movie based on a book
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. Yep, exactly. We could say that's another really good adaptation
Mm-hmm.
of a book. Understanding that, it's funny. People used to say, "Oh, the book was so much better,"
Yeah.
but I think over time we now understand like what the constraints were,
Mm-hmm.
either in terms of running time, in terms of a budget,
Yeah.
in terms of the production code
Mm-hmm.
demands, all of these things that were constraining could conceivably constrain the creativity of these filmmakers, and they somehow managed to turn them into positives.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in all these books that we talked about, where the adaptation like just pruned off the stray parts of the book or the digressions that the author maybe went into, which are great when you're reading,
Yeah.
but you can't have them in a screenplay, right?
Yeah.
So I really admire those writers like Jules Furthman, who adapted Nightmare Alley, who understood like this stays, this goes, this stays, this goes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
they
I think just, to me, John Huston was the greatest adapter of fiction.
I have to agree with that.
Because it's everything from the Maltese Falcon to James Joyce's The Dead. I
Yep.
mean, and he even, I don't know. For me, he's like one of those people that is just like he was astounding at that. You
He
just
was a
because he
great
understood the stories.
precisely, and he was a great reader.
Yeah.
He was a great reader who admired really great writing,
Yeah.
but he was not beholden to it. Have you
Yeah.
ever read? Oh my God, what is the name of the book? I'm drawing a blank now. People will know. I think it's just called Picture,
Yeah.
which is about the making of the Red Badge of Courage.
Of course, I've read it. Who was in the
Okay.
Red Badge of
Oh, of
Courage?
course, Audie Murphy was in the Red Badge of Courage. So
I
you
wrote
have
that.
read the book, but
Yeah.
that's one of the great books about making a film, and it
Mm-hmm.
just shows you how. As my heart kind of went out to Houston because he had such incredible ambitions for that movie,
Yeah.
and you just saw how it got whittled away, and there's a skeleton left of what he
Yeah.
intended that movie to be. So it's not just recent history where that kind of stuff happens. It's been throughout Hollywood history, but
And I liked it too because Houston talked about working with Eddie Murphy, and he said the thing about Eddie Murphy is if he trusts you as a director, he'll give a great performance.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and he really I think that that's it's not my favorite Eddie performance, but a lot of people consider like his best performance, even though I actually really like No Name on the Bullet is my favorite performance of
Yeah.
his because it's so dark.
Yes. Okay. And
Yeah,
did we answer Mark's question completely?
I think
Which films improve with repeat
viewing, yeah.
viewings?
And what's
Well,
interest?
the one that I love that hits all of these is and we've mentioned it earlier, is The Breaking Point,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is just a film that plays just as well today
Yeah,
as it did when it was made. I think Garfield's performance is incredible. I still would argue that I mean, Michael Curtiz has directed a lot of great movies, but I don't know that his direction has ever been better than it is in that film. I mean,
yeah,
just everything is flawless in that movie.
yeah,
And I think it has uh, aged really, really well. And I can watch it over and over and over again just
yeah.
because of the subtleties of the writing, the direction, the performances. Everything about it is great.
Yeah, and I'm that way about the Maltese Falcon. That's the film noir I've watched the most.
Yeah. It's interesting because and I could throw in the Asphalt Jungle, and the thing they all have in common is that they're all perfectly cast movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time somebody walks on, you go, oh, here they are.
Yeah,
They're great in this film. It's like when Peter Lorre shows up in the Maltese Falcon. It's
yeah,
just like, oh, and then Sidney Greenstreet, and then Elijah Cook and Mary Astor, and it's like, it's so good. And the Asphalt Jungle is the same way. Every time they go back to Cobby's place, it's like Mark Lawrence is just fantastic.
yeah.
And Louis Calhern is just great.
He is fantastic, and
And
the woman that plays his wife is amazing in that.
Dorothy Tree, she's fabulous. Yeah.
That's an incredible performance.
Oh, Lon, when I think about the people you associate with, there's nothing
Or
to it,
just
my dear. Crime is just a left-handed form of human endeavor.
yeah,
It's
but I just love
great.
the scene when she asked him to stay, and I think she wanted to play cards or
Play
something,
bridge,
play
yeah.
bridge, and I just like my heart broke
Heartbreaking.
so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. See, that's why these movies are damn good.
yeah, and you can watch it more than once because you pick up different things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, another movie that, and this is not, he said classic era, so I'm not going to cite my favorite Mulholland Drive, which is a
Which
movie
you
that,
just did.
which I just did, but a movie that requires repeat viewings. That's one of those movies that if I'm flipping around on the television and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, why did I have to see this? Because I'm watching it all the way through to the end,
Yeah,
every single time.
yeah, I'm that way about Laura too when it comes if I'm flipping and it's on there because it's just like it builds such an incredible world where you're just getting sucked into this
Yep.
world of these people. It's
And
amazing.
and again, a perfect cast. I mean,
Yeah,
the perfect cast has a lot to do with repeat viewings of movies. It really
absolutely.
does.
And a good story. And also another good interesting adaptation of a book. Because in the book, it's narrated by different people at different times.
Yes, yes. As is The Big Clock, which is
Uh-huh.
another really good adaptation. The Big
Yeah.
Clock, follows different characters chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
And again, Jonathan Latimer, his adaptation of that is really, really good.
Yeah.
So see, we're still answering that other question.
I know. It just they're, people they used to base movies on books.
Yeah, yeah, yes, they did. Not always on true crime stories,
Yeah, her
which
comic books.
yeah, comic books and true crime. They've taken over everything.
Okay, so this is from Kingpin Johnny from Doylestown, PA. Can you talk about still photography in noir? Weegee's tabloid photos immediately come to mind. His Naked City photos are pure noir, and Kubrick started as a still photographer. His late 40s still camera work foreshadowed The Killing. Gordon Parks did the same work for Life magazine, in particular, the 1957 spread, The Atmosphere of Crime, which was recently turned into an excellent book. he eventually did Shaft in 1971, which is surely neo-noir, right? So what are your thoughts about the influence of still photography on film noir?
I mean, Weegee's influence is pretty obvious. There are clearly other photographers who take pictures, with very strong light and shadow.
Uh-huh.
But because Weegee's work was crime based, right? I mean, and it was nocturnal. You hardly see any Weegee photographs taken in the daytime.
Uh-huh.
And because he had his police radio, and he was totally noir.
Uh-huh.
So his influence on the genre is strong. I'm sure that all the photographers in the 1940s, the cinematographers, knew who he was,
Uh-huh.
and that they were, impressed by I mean, clearly Weegee didn't photograph the naked city, but his photographs clearly inspired the naked city. And Mark Hellinger bought the title of Weegee's book so that he could call his film Naked City.
Uh-huh.
And William Daniels did the actual photography. But if you don't think that William Daniels was studying Weegee's photographs, before he went to Manhattan to shoot that film, to me, it's obvious that he did.
Uh-huh.
So yes, I mean, I wish I could come up with other photographers off the top of my head right now that are as influential as Weegee, but I don't think there are any. I think
Yeah.
he's the guy, and clearly Kubrick also studied Weegee's work,
Uh-huh.
and so did Gordon Parks. I mean, if you were a photojournalist, you knew all about Weegee, and
Uh-huh.
if that was your your predilection was towards the dark side, he's going to be an influence. There's just no question about it.
Yeah. And if people haven't, you can go online and look up photographs by Stanley Kubrick, because they're amazing.
Oh yeah.
I just want to put that out there, that if you get a chance, just go in there and look at that. And also, I kind of think, to me, sort of the person to me that kind of came later that was seemed to be kind of extension of Weegee was Diane Arbus, whose photographs I also really recommend that you see. But to me, you can kind of see, like, I don't know if she was influenced by him or not. I kind of think she must have been, but I don't know what her background was. But to me, that's almost like the next step in what he was doing, especially in this more marginalized people.
Mm-hmm.
My 2 cents. And she had a very sort of, and for an art photographer, she had a very more newspaper style. To me. She wasn't like other kind of like the more artistic side of photography.
It's interesting that as we're discussing this, it occurs to me that what people think of as noir in still photography is by and large photojournalism, right? Whereas noir cinematography is anything but photojournalism.
It's not like that at all.
It's totally staged, and it's archly theatrical. And so Weegee and Arbus, and they were finding their lighting in the actual world. I mean, they weren't. I mean, Weegee would cheat. He had his little tricks where he could throw a little key light somewhere, or to make a photograph more dramatic, so that it was enhanced photojournalism.
Yeah.
But I just think that's kind of interesting that street photography, if you're doing it at night, it's going to come out kind of noirish.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all there is to it,
Yeah, because I think the more like actual noir cinematography, to me, like I don't know. There's Cindy Sherman. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work.
Sure,
she's
I know.
An incredible photographer, and she's done a lot of things that are very film inspired. I mean, she kind of goes through different stages.
Yeah.
But
she stages her stuff.
Very, very staged, and she's gotten to this point now where she actually sort of has started modeling herself. It's really interesting because she like there's one she did, and it was like this classic like aging LA actress. It was such a great photograph because to me it just could have been actually taken of
right.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It was just and also where
I like the way you stepped back from saying a name right there, Anne. You were going to say it's just like if she was. I better not say it.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Yes. Not that there was one particular person in mind, but we'll talk about that after the show.
We'll talk about that after the show.
Okay, but I note here once again you do your organizing of the questions, because Jeff from Brooklyn has a question that also concerns Weegee, and he notes that we have talked about him before, but didn't talk about the movie based on Weegee, The Public Eye with Joe Pesci. Right. And of course, Jeff wants to know if we consider that to be a film noir. And he wants to know our opinion on Joe Pesci's portrayal of Arthur Felig, aka Weegee. Well, I mean, I have shown it as the opening night film at the Noir City Film Festival years ago.
Yeah.
So I do consider it to be it feels to me a bit more like a tribute to noir than an actual noir itself, because I don't know what you thought of that film. Did you like the movie?
I did like it. Yeah. I mean, it's not I don't know. It was good. But for me, it's not something that I had a lot of affection for, I guess is what I'm saying. But I thought it was a good movie. And I was glad, and I was really happy that I got to see it on a big screen.
Yeah.
Too. That was because I hadn't seen it before, and I like it just was really good to see that on a big screen, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, I understand. And I have to I'm trying to remember, I think it was Howard Franklin directed it, and it was clearly a labor of love. Because he just wanted to create Weegee's world on film.
Yeah.
But this question applies to all this talk we've been having about great adaptations and great screenplays. I would have preferred watching 2 hours of Joe Pesci driving around New York photographing crime scenes with no story at all. Because the movie falls apart when it tries to shoehorn a story into Weegee's career, and it makes him like the savior of this woman that he thinks owns this nightclub, and there's some racket that she's involved in, and there's a blackmail plot. And the problem is he doesn't figure in any of it. Yeah. I mean, he's the guy who took pictures that are going to help, clear somebody or whatever. I can't even remember how it goes. But there's just nothing that engages you about the plot. What engages you is just Joe Pesci driving around in that old Chrysler with his lab in the trunk, photographing crime scenes. It's like that's all I needed.
Yeah, I know exactly. So I felt like Nightcrawler kind of did it better.
It's a great call there, because that's a terrific double bill. Those two films on a double bill together, that is perfect. That's like America in the 1940s, America in the whatever the hell 2000s or whatever when Nightcrawler was made. Yeah, in the 2000s.
If you want to triple, then stay up even later and watch Shakedown.
Yes, Shakedown I love that movie. God. Anyway. And I thought Joe Pesci was the perfect guy to play Arthur Felig.
Yes.
And I like the fact that Joe Pesci got to play a part where it was a Joe Pesci part, but he wasn't violent.
Yeah.
He wasn't violent and crazy and off his nut. He was just like a guy doing his job, And what other actor could deliver those lines? Like when the first scene where you see him doing the thing and he takes the hat and he flips it into the crime scene and he goes, "It's the hat. They love to see the dead guy's hat."
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, who can deliver that line any better than Joe Pesci? It was great.
Yeah.
I love to see the dead guy's hat.
Yeah. He was like the perfect person to play that role. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is it your turn? Yeah, it's your turn.
Okay.
8.
This is Dave in Pie Creek, Queensland. I love the fact that there's like an international audience for us now.
It's very nice.
Dave watched, here we go, The Big Clock again last night. Great film, no femme fatale, but two bad male characters, Charles Laughton and George McCready. And that got Dave to wondering, in film noirs, there are often two or more really bad male characters. In Raw Deal, for example, Raymond Burr and John Ireland, and a badly flawed Dennis O'Keefe. But again, no real femme fatale. No, because Dennis O'Keefe is the homme fatale in that film.
Movie. Yeah.
How common, A, are femme fatales in film noir, and B, how common are two femme fatales in the same film? And Dave says he can only think of Rhonda Fleming's brief but impressive turn in Out of the Past, which, quite honestly, I don't really see her as a femme fatale in that film. She's just a good looking woman.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, she's compromised, of course, but I don't think she's a full on femme fatale. Okay, can you think of any noir films where there are like competing femme fatales?
I can't think of anything, but I feel like there is, and I'm just not remembering.
Well,
I mean? Like, I feel like it's got to be some film where these two women are kind of squaring off because, well, I mean, in a way, what's the one with Joan Crawford that's set in San Francisco where she's the writer?
Sudden Fear.
Sudden Fear. She has to become a femme fatale to protect herself from the femme fatale. I mean, she has to become clever and cunning and ruthless to save herself.
Yes, but she's trying to save herself. She's not trying to destroy somebody else. I mean, she is trying to destroy Lester at a certain point, and Irene, right? But again, I don't think of that character as a femme fatale-ish character. There is.
By the way, it's another one where the book is really interesting, and
I haven't read that. I found
it, but I was just like somewhere, and it was just like on the shelf, so I bought it. It was surprisingly good, but the ending is different. Okay. And she's more ruthless.
And that's Edna Sherry, is that right?
That's
the
correct.
Author is Edna Sherry. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
Interesting. I might have to check that one out then.
Yeah, I liked
it. From the classic era, I'm drawing a blank. Yeah. I mean, some people will probably have already said when they're weighing in here.
Yeah.
They've probably said The Big Sleep because, but you'd have to consider, Lauren Bacall to be a femme fatale in that movie.
I think she's a femme fatale. She's just dealing with a crazy sister.
Yeah, and Martha Vickers could, in fact, be the femme fatale in that film. She's just a nympho little sister, I mean, she's not. She doesn't really figure that prominently in the plot. She's just, and clearly she was the character that Spillane was riffing on when he created those twins.
Oh yeah,
in I the Jury.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, and a quick plug: Mickey Spillane is in an episode of Columbo.
Okay, and is he, well, obviously he's the bad guy, right? And is he the bad guy, or is he just making an appearance?
No, he's the victim.
He's the victim. Oh, interesting.
He's a writer, and it's at the very beginning. He's actually the victim.
Okay.
And it's one of the I think it's one of the David Cassidy episodes, which are great.
Okay. Well, I'll have to find that. It's probably better than The Girl Hunters, which is his turn as Mickey.
Yes, I would assume so. I haven't seen The Girl Hunters.
It's amusing, but he's talk about tongue in cheek. Holy cow. The one movie, there's a film from the 90s, mid 90s called Palmetto that Volker Schlondorf made with Woody Harrelson and Elizabeth Shue and Gina Gershon. And that's the film that strikes me as competing femme fatales. Oh, and of course there's so they're not classic movies, they're neo-noirs, because
Yeah.
there's also Wild Things,
Yeah.
right? With Denise Richards and Neve Campbell. And they're both femme fatales in that. And
Yeah.
Elizabeth Shue and Gina Gershon are both femme fatales in Palmetto,
Yeah.
which is a pretty fun movie. It's not great, but it clearly was. Volker Schlondorf is a really great filmmaker, and every filmmaker, it seems, is going to do their film noir.
Yeah.
and this was his. It's actually based on a novel by James Hadley Chase, the title of which escapes me right now. It was not called Palmetto. Anyway, so those are two more recent ones that I can think of.
Huh.
But it's an interesting question. Thanks, Dave. And now I'm going to start looking for it.
Yeah.
I also have to think that back then it wasn't that common, because whoever the star was, the actress, was going to say, this other woman can't have much of a role.
Yeah.
If it's like a competitive thing in terms of allure and
Yeah.
and all that, it's like no actress wants another one.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the of Slightly Scarlet,
Mm-hmm.
right? The John Alton photograph, James M. Cain
Yeah.
story. Arlene Dahl is sort of the femme fatale character
Uh-huh.
in that, and Rhonda Fleming is not. She's kind of
Yeah.
the good girl.
Yeah.
But they're both just drop dead gorgeous in
Yeah.
that film. But I remember distinctly wanting to show that at a festival and having both of the actresses say, but she's not coming, is she?
Oh my God, really?
Yes. Yeah, Rhonda clearly said, so you're not inviting Arlene, are you? And when I talked to Arlene, she was like, is Rhonda going to be there? Because that's why I thought of that. It's like they don't want the competition,
Yeah.
They don't want, they know the audience is going to say who looked better.
Yeah.
Who looked better when and it's like who needs that?
Mm.
If there aren't two of them, then it's like she looked great. But as soon as there's two of them, it's like she looked better.
Uh-huh.
That's just the way human beings are. That's the way their brains work. It's really unfair, but there you have it. And having interviewed both of them separately, I can say they both look great.
Yeah.
They both look great.
And that was another story of a sister trying to take care of her crazy sister too.
Yep, exactly. Arlene Dahl played a great nymphomaniac in that movie. She had such an interesting vibe in that film. It was really good, because she didn't play it dangerous. She played it kind of kooky.
Yeah.
And it was really, really good. Anyway. Yeah. Okay, you go now.
Okay. Noir or not, the Shanghai Gesture. Sometimes it gets labeled noir. Definitely elements that are noirish, but I'm on the fence. I liked it though. Can't go wrong with Gene Tierney and Victor Mature. Great cast, and that's from our friend Dennis from Champlain, New York.
Okay. My litmus test for when people say, "Is this noir or not?" is to say, well, imagine if you, like, if they say it's color, and can that be a noir? I always say, just turn the color off on your TV.
Yeah.
Turn the color off and watch it in black and white. And if it feels like a noir, then the DNA is noir.
Yeah.
Same thing with like The Letter, The Shanghai Gesture, all these movies set outside the United States. It's like, just imagine it's a gambling house in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
And would it be this, would that feel like a film noir to you? And The Shanghai Gesture, completely, it's completely a noir. It's like, I just call it the International League of Degenerates, which is basically, and that stage play was hugely controversial.
Yeah.
I think it was like written in 1921 or something. John Colton's play is just, it's about the worst instincts and slave trading and gambling and prostitution and drug use. I mean, everything good is in that movie or in that play.
Yeah.
It doesn't all make it into the movie, but
Yeah.
von Sternberg was the right guy to direct it.
Yeah, and it's also, the rare homme fatale in that one too.
Yes.
And Victor Mature is really great in that film.
Dr. Omar.
Yeah.
I am proud to say I have never paid for anything in my entire life. I do like that movie. Okay, now Jeff wants to know, and just to say, Shanghai Gesture, I'm not sure that has been restored, but it's hard to see.
Yeah, it went out of, it had been in print for a while. It went out of print really fast.
Yeah, I mean, I've shown it, and I think it was an archival print from the Eastman House or something, and it looked great. But that wouldn't be a bad one to find restored someday. I'm drawing a blank on what studio released that. Was that it? Was that Fox? Yeah, it had to be Fox. If it was Gene Tierney and Victor Mature,
it had to be Fox. Yeah,
had to be a Fox film. Okay. I'm not going to say what I was about to say.
Yeah, Fox didn't release it though. Image released it when it was on DVD. It was an Image release.
So there must be some kind of rights thing there as well. That because they never did put it out in that original Fox Noir series. Okay, Jeff wants to know if Jailhouse Rock is a film noir, and he says my friend and I disagree on this, as do most friends disagree on what is noir in it. Jeff doesn't think it's dark enough, but he insists it is. What is the general consensus on this film? Jeff, I'm going to say that you should switch your noir Elvis allegiance to King Creole, which is much more of a noir film than Jailhouse Rock. That's my opinion. Anne, do you want to weigh in on that? Or
I mean, it's been so long since I don't think I've seen Jailhouse Rock since I was a kid.
The whole film, like you haven't seen the whole film,
Not in a really long time. I mean, they used to run the Elvis movies on TV when I was a kid on Saturday afternoons. So I know I've seen it, but it's been so long I couldn't tell you whether or not I thought it was more.
Well, I mean, King Creole is a crime movie. It's a crime movie with Elvis in it, right? So, and he sings, of course. But Jailhouse Rock, it's interesting because for people who maybe don't know this, it was written, the original story was written by Nedrick Young, who the actor and writer, but he started as an actor, and he's in Gun Crazy. He plays Dave, the reporter in the small town that Bart is from. That's Ned Young, and he's in Crime Wave, and he's in Decoy. He's in a bunch of these movies, and then he got blacklisted, and I think Andre Dutoth was the only guy who would work with him. But when he was blacklisted, he started writing because he didn't think he'd ever get in front of a camera again.
Yeah.
And he wrote the story and submitted it at MGM for a crime picture. And this guy, he was working as a bartender in LA, in Culver City. And this guy from MGM, executive, came in to have cocktails, and they started talking. And Ned Young told him about that story. And he said, that sounds perfect for this new guy we got, Elvis Presley. And so they turned it into a musical.
Wow.
And so, I mean, its DNA there's a crime story there at the core of it all.
Yeah.
But I don't think the end result is particularly noirish, but doesn't really, Jeff, late breaking news doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, if you love it, you love it, right? Yeah. I mean, it's fun to argue about these things as long as I said before, as long as we don't get too serious about it.
This is from CA. Will we ever get to see 13th Letter? You should probably tell people what 13th Letter is.
13th Letter is an Otto Preminger film made at Fox. I think it was 1951. I think it was right either before or after he made Whirlpool there. And Linda Darnell and Michael Redgrave are in it. And it is a remake of Henri Georges Clouzot's La Corbeau, which was what, 1943 or 44 or something, about poison pen letters in a town, leading to all kinds of vileness and murder and stuff. And I have no doubt that the problem with that film is the underlying story. They have not cleared again the underlying story that it's based on, which clearly was written in France. I forget who the writer was, but that was another one that never got into that Fox film noir set that was now, it was like 20 something years old. It was 20 years ago that they produced those, and nobody has seen it. Nobody has seen any sign of the 13th Letter reappearing. And I would say the odds are even lower now because Disney has taken over the Fox archive.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to badmouth Disney, but it's just the way it goes. When these big corporations, Disney has bigger fish to fry, right?
Yeah.
So when these big corporations take over the film libraries, they don't even know what's in there, nor do they really care that much. So why they would go on a hunt to resurrect and revive the 13th Letter? No, not going to happen. So that may be a lost one, which is kind of ridiculous, but there you have it. Sorry, on that down note.
Well, here's one from Liz, Hisdale, New York. Maybe this will make you feel happy. It seems to me that people who love movies remember their first film noir in a much more substantial way than, say, their first Western or first musical. It has a more psychological effect. I remember my first film noir so distinctly, being 16 in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, wrapping foil around the antenna of my little portable TV to try to get the New York station on a rainy night, watching the movie through all that snow on the screen to watch The Phantom Lady. What is it about film noirs that make you remember that first film so well, like a filmic primal scene?
Was that a primal scream or a primal scene?
Primal scene, not primal
a primal
scream.
Scene. Boy, I can relate. I mean, I had the exact same experience. Maybe that's why Liz is associating this, the rabbit ears on the TV and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But that is a really kind of a profound observation. And it's kind of something that I wrote a little bit about in Dark City, like why the classic noir films stick in your head when newer films don't.
Yeah.
Right. And the example I used was comparing Crisscross to Steven Soderbergh's version of Crisscross, called The Underneath. And it's just that there was nothing that memorable about the imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And because noir is so stylized, I honestly think that's what it is, that there's this vividness that in your mind, the images that you're seeing already are playing out like some kind of dream world on the screen, which are like the way you remember things. They're so vivid because when you have a memory of something, it's so incredibly vivid, it almost doesn't seem realistic. And that's kind of like what noir, visually, what noir looks like. You remember that's why people so often say to me, can you help me remember? There was a scene of this car. It was on the bridge. It was a high angle. It was raining. all this kind of stuff. They may not remember the title, but they remember the imagery so strongly. And I believe that's because of the noir, what we now call the noir style, right? That it like lodges in your head. So when you think of Double Indemnity, what do you think of? You think of, I think of Fred McMurray in that house with the light coming through the Venetian blinds.
Yeah.
I think of Barbara Stanwyck when she lights the cigarette and there's that close up of her,
I just think of her eyes going big.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it is the imagery. When I think of Crisscross, it's that incredible shot of Yvonne DiCarlo in the parking lot when she looks right into the camera and talks to Steve, to Burt Lancaster. It's nothing to do with realism.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that's why it sticks in your head.
And I think that's great.
And with musicals, you're going to remember the music. You're not going to remember necessarily. I mean, you remember how cool Fred Astaire looks or how athletic Gene Kelly is or, Eleanor Powell tap dancing or something. But it's the music you remember. And Westerns, I mean, no offense to John Ford and Monument Valley, but you've seen one vista in a Western and you've kind of seen them all, I just don't get the visual distinction between Westerns as much as I get from film noir. I could be wrong about that, but.
And I think too, like for me, as much, I really, really encourage people, if you can, to see a silent film up on the big screen, or at least watch them, because silent films bypass language. It's like watching a dream. It's like it hits you on a level that's really different. Like I just remember, like I watched Blood the first time I saw Blood of a Poet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like, it was like pure cinema. And I just think with silent films, I just want people to experience them because it's just such a different feeling. And to me, this is how I feel about, like, that to me is like primal, because it's just hitting you on such an incredible level. I mean, it's like you lose your, I think, intellectualism in a lot of ways when you watch silent films, which is really incredible to me. And there's just like, so when I think of like really stunning visuals, I gotta tell you, it's like from silent films, like those are the things where the visuals are really imprinted on my head.
Yeah, I totally get that. Did you see, I can't remember if I introduced it or not, but at the Silent Film Festival a few years ago, did you see the movie Tonka of the Gallows?
No, I didn't. That may have been the year that I went down to my brother's wedding.
Oh, because that's what you're talking about. I mean, it's a complete noir film with a female protagonist, and it's so incredibly vivid that there's imagery in that film that I cannot get out of my head. I know, like, precise shots that are just so stunning. Yeah, I second that. Silent films. Von Sternberg's Docks of New York is a silent film that is just like a precursor to noir, that is just so visually stunning, and there's no dialogue to be distracting.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. And I just think the silent films, I mean, I don't think that we've ever gotten back to the level of visual storytelling that was present at that, especially the last couple of years, that last decade of silent film, where I mean, people talk about stuff, and it's not, and it's not like I just go around only watching silent films. You know me, I watch a bunch of different stuff, but I mean, realistically, I don't think we've ever re-achieved that level of visual storytelling.
I completely agree. And I don't honestly think that you can say that you are a student of cinema or understand cinema if you don't watch silent film, because that's where the language was created. Yeah. And to think like, yeah, but we've gone past that. We've surpassed that now. It's like,
it's bullshit.
Not really. Not really. you need to go back and which is why I just when I see a silent film that's so far ahead of its time, just I can't remember if we talked about this, but I did vote in the Sight and Sound poll this last year, and one of the films that I put on my list was Abel Gance's Napoleon, which because they said it's like the great film. They said what are the greatest films? So it's so funny that Jean Dielman ended up being the number one film on the list, because to me it is like it has nothing to do with and I don't mean to be controversial at all by saying this, but when they asked about great films, I took great seriously.
Yeah.
Like literally, like Napoleon is a great film. The Seven Samurai is a great film. Because it's like big and has ambition, and it's like trying to do this.
Children of Paradise.
Children of Paradise. Great film. Yeah. Anyway, so it was just funny because I laughed at myself because it's like, well, Napoleon was my pick because every film technique that has ever been used subsequently is in that movie.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, he does everything: handheld cameras, moving cameras, the cameras swinging around, tracking shots. Let's expand the screen. Let's do widescreen when widescreen didn't exist. It's like this incredible achievement that clearly was too much because he blew himself apart making it.
But I still remember seeing that at the Paramount with live music. You were there too, because I ran into you after the screening, and we were both like, it was like
that was the greatest experience I've ever had in a movie theater. Greatest experience I've ever had in a movie theater.
Me too.
And I saw it 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
It's like that's a 6-hour movie,
I wish I had done that, because I only went once, and my friend had gotten tickets for both shows, and I regret that now that I didn't go for the second screening. Oh well.
Anyway, it's
that's it, man.
That's all the questions. And I didn't intend to, and now everybody's going to be saying, we want to see Eddie's list of his 10 films, but I studiously did not make it public. I didn't post it on social media or anything. But I think 6 of the movies I picked are on that list.
Yeah.
So it's not like some weird esoteric thing. There wasn't a single film noir on my list, I'll have you know. Because I took the great thing kind of seriously,
Well, yeah.
And
but those lists used to be different. Like those lists now have gotten really sucky. I'm sorry, but if you go back, you look at those lists from like people when there was, I hate to say it, I guess maybe because there's not rep cinema anymore. You know what I mean? And if you look at those lists in the times when there was a heavy rep cinema scene, you can tell the difference because these programmers would screen these films, and it's like that's, like getting a film education, and that's why I like the Brattles tag for their theater, and it's true. And not really just, people just, I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure what the point of it is. Yeah. It was kind of, and I took it seriously. It wasn't like I'm not one of those people that's going to say, this is impossible. You can't pick 10. It's like, it's idiotic to begin with.
Yeah.
So I don't really take it seriously. Like these are the 10 greatest movies. But the thing that I came away with from this experience was, how politicized the whole process has become. And perhaps politicized isn't the right word, but it's like the critical thinking involved in this, like they're trying to establish something beyond just what are the great movies, right? So clearly, I think that the fact that they expanded the voting to twice as many people, and then everybody felt like, well, we have to fix what was wrong with the canon in the past.
Yeah.
So, there are going to be female filmmakers represented. And when everybody who voted, or so many people felt that way, that clearly it's skewing in favor of Chantal Akerman and Claire Denis and Agnes Varda, who hadn't been properly represented before. These are films that critics will think are great.
Yeah.
Anybody would think The Seven Samurai is great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like it. That's it. So it's just interesting how the lists. My final word on that subject.
Okay.
The lists say more about the critical thinking about film at the time the list is done than it has anything to do with the films themselves.
Yeah.
Like there is realistically no way that Citizen Kane like falls out of any list of the greatest films ever made. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting. Like the way we all saw Vertigo skyrocket on that list.
Yeah.
When there are 5 or 6 other Hitchcock films that you could easily say are just as good as Vertigo.
Yeah.
But it just became like the thing.
Yeah.
Then the Searchers just became unanimously decreed the greatest Western of all time. And I will tell you right now, going back to questions we had here, that screenplay is not one of the great screenplays of all time.
I don't think it's even like people always, it bothers me because, I'm a big John Ford fan. That is not like even in my top. I just don't like the film that much. He's done so many, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. You're going to talk about a great Western.
Yeah, Wagon Master, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Rio Grande, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon.
Rio Grande's my favorite.
They're all great. Red River is a better film than The Searchers. I mean, I'm sorry, but it just is. I mean,
I'd rather watch it. I'm not a huge Red River fan, but I'd take that over Rio Bravo. Yeah. That's a great.
I just find it fascinating that the way these things go critically.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
Yeah. I know, and it's sort of the same. And I also, just like if I was going to pick a John Ford film that I think is like, it's not my Wagon Masters in Rio Grande are my like personal favorites. But How Green Was My Valley, I think is like his best film. And I think it's one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I have no problem about Citizen Kane that year and him and Ford getting director. I'm fine with that.
And it's just funny because
that's an incredible film.
It's so odd that you wonder what it's supposed to mean. And when I was sent my invitation to vote on this, they didn't really give me any specifics. It could just be 10 movies.
Yeah.
It's that your list of the 10 greatest movies, but they didn't like specify like what are they supposed to represent or anything like that, because everybody's going to just argue about it then.
Yeah.
But it is so odd because like if you ask me to say what's the greatest American film ever made, I'm not going to say 2001: A Space Odyssey or Vertigo or I'm going to say The Godfather. And it's not even a movie that I like that much. But to me, it now represents. It has supplanted Gone with the Wind as the great American movie. Yeah. The movie that I think tells you what you need to know about America in a way that it's still just a movie, but it's more than that. It's something.
No, that's what I say about the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. It's not just because it's not just a good Western, but it's saying about how America was settled, and the great quote of, print the legend.
Right.
And that to me is why it's a great. Plus John Wayne's performance, that's fucking amazing. But it's that because it's saying something about America at that time. I mean, you could watch. I mean, like Ford is like Ozu, right, where you could see a history of Japan from Ozu's from the silent period through the end of the 60s. It's like you could just see the history of Japan through his films. And I think it's the same for John Ford, is that John Ford went back further and you can see like the history of America through his films.
Yeah. And two of my all-time favorites that I did vote for fell off the list entirely, which I can't understand that at all. Yeah. like Chinatown is no longer on the list. Like, how did
Wow.
that happen? And neither is my pick is the best Western ever made, The Wild Bunch. I just think
Yeah.
The Wild Bunch is the best Western ever made. For the same reasons we're talking about The Godfather. It's a Western, it's just a Western. It's a heist picture.
Yeah.
And it also says so much about America and the frontier and
Yeah.
the outlaw mentality and the encroachment of the industrial age on the old West and all
Yeah.
this great stuff. But clearly, Sam Peckinpah is not making any 100 best lists these
Is he
days.
out of favor
He is
now?
a little bit out of favor, I'm sure, you know.
Oh.
So, but that's why that whole thing seems so stupid to me. It's like, how suddenly is the Wild Bunch not worthy
Mhm.
if it was worthy 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, like I say, it's all about the critical thinking, and it has very, very little to do with the films themselves. So, anyway, and with that, I will don my holiday garb. I go this way.
Bah humbug.
There you go. That's what I want to thank Rena Kine, who attended the screening of I, the Jury at the Grand Lake Theater several days ago, and she gave me this as my holiday gift. Black and white and bah humbug. Perfect for this season.
Yeah.
And Anne, you know, I still have some things for you over here that I need to get you. I'll try to do it over the holidays.
Yeah.
Because I have some stuff that's been sent to you at the foundation address. And so I need to get that to you for your holiday cheer.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm down in Sugar Land, Texas, 23rd through the 29th. Go see my mom.
20th to the 29th?
23rd through the 29th.
Okay, well, that gives me a few days to get it to you before you leave, or when you come back. Either way.
Yeah.
Okay, that was fun.
Yay!
And I'm glad that's our last one of this year. Right?
Yes,
our last of 2022.
Yes,
but
so
we will be back.
Happy New Year, everybody, and we'll be back in the new year.
Okay. Happy holidays, happy New Year. We'll see you in 2023.